So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, as many of you likely know, the Detroit Lions are losing DJ Chark to free agency. The Detroit Lions' #1 wide receiver for the 2023 season is on his way to Carolina after signing a one-year, $5 million contract to go be the #1 wide receiver in Carolina. And of course, that opens up a hole on the Lions offense. Who's going to replace DJ Chark and who's going to replace the role and the production for this Detroit Lions offense? Well, today, that is exactly what we are going to talk about. We're going to look at the role DJ Chark actually served, the production he actually added to this Lions team, and how the Lions can replace it either with drafts, free agents, or potentially the players that they currently have on their roster. So, with that being said, let's take a look at the most obvious answer, right? Look at the NFL draft. Now, the NFL draft has a lot of really good wide receivers for the Lions to potentially take a look at. And while there is obviously the notion that you should go out and get that X, right? You should go out, get that 6'4", 6'5" wide receiver that can stretch the field vertically, which is what DJ Chark did. I don't think that's necessarily a end-all, be-all. I think there are a lot of archetypes that can provide the same things that DJ Chark did for the Lions offense without necessarily being the prototypical X wide receiver. Now, there are guys like that in this class. Quinten Johnston is a player like that, and although I'm not incredibly high on Johnston, I do admit that the upside is relatively high. A.T. Perry, Rashid Rice. Moving on the board, you have Cedric Tillman, you have Marvin Mims, you have Xavier Hutchinson, you have Andre Isovas, you have guys even farther down the board who are, bigger players like Justin Shorter, who's a 6'4" wide receiver out of the University of Florida. You have Jaden Hasselwood, who is a 6'4" wide receiver that runs in the 4.3s out of Arkansas. There's a lot of really, really good options that do fit the prototypical X wide receiver. However, I don't think that is necessarily an end-all, be-all. Right, there is this notion that you need an X wide receiver. You need somebody to play the X role. But for a lot of very successful teams over the last couple of years, they haven't had a traditional X, right? They've relied on guys that have speed, guys that can create separation, guys that are route runners, guys that have strong hands, guys that are smart and know where the sticks are and know the crafty ways of getting open. And of course, you have your dominant X wide receivers. So you have your DK Metcalfs, you have your Mike Evans, you have some of the elite jump ball contested catch wide receivers in this league. But a lot of the great wide receivers aren't those types of players. A lot of the elite wide receivers in this NFL right now are route runners, are separators. And for a quarterback like Jared Goff, who relies on that separation, relies on route runners and chemistry with his wide receivers, I think that is more of an ideal role. Right? And there are a lot of guys that fit that too. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, Michael Wilson, even Nathaniel Dell, who again, I'm not the highest on, but I admit that he does run good routes and creates good separation. Parker Washington, Jaden Reed. These are all players that fit the more prototypical Jared Goff weapon, right? Not the jump ball 6'5" Megatron, but the smaller Cooper Kupps, the Amon-Ra St. Browns, the Khalif Raymonds, the route runners, and the separators that Jared Goff really finds success with are some really good options to replace not necessarily the role of X, but replace the 500 yards of production that DJ Chark is leaving a void for the Lions to fill. Now, there is also a chance the Detroit Lions do not look to go into the draft with any gaping holes, and they do look to fill the wide receiver one or the X wide receiver position before the draft even begins. And for that, I have a couple of options as well. Starting off with, again, a very obvious one that a lot of people have talked about, Marvin Jones Jr. Played his last 2 seasons with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and last year played 16 games for the Jacksonville Jaguars, having 46 receptions on 81 targets for 529 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, this production almost identically matches what DJ Chark brought to the Detroit Lions statistically a season ago. However, Marvin Jones does have the advantage of playing in 16 of the 17 available games and being more readily available for use versus a guy like DJ Chark, who was really only available for 7, 8, 9 games and wasn't really a factor for the early stages of the season and, of course, for the time that he spent on injured reserve. Now, taking a look at some of the more advanced stats on why I think Marvin Jones is a good fit for the Detroit Lions, here is an advanced next-gen stats by the NFL, and it measures separation per route run. As you can see, DJ Chark was near the bottom of the NFL in available wide receivers, creating just 2.2 yards of separation per route run, and just below him was Marvin Jones. Now, they run very similar separation numbers. Their cushions were pretty much the same, and even though Marvin Jones doesn't necessarily have the deep speed that DJ Chark has, he actually averaged more of a cushion per route than DJ Chark and had nearly identical separation numbers, on top of having very good and very similar, very comparable production numbers. I think Marvin Jones would be a really good player, kind of that security blanket for Jared Goff, kind of that reliable wide receiver. I know we have St. Brown, who is that security blanket. I know we have guys like Brock Wright, who Jared Goff is incredibly comfortable with, but maybe another bigger body guy, somebody on the outside, a veteran presence who knows how to get the job done, and it actually has recent playoff experience, I think could be a good option for the Detroit Lions to bring in. He's somebody that statistically is very comparable to DJ Chark, and even though he's not necessarily as big or fast or athletic as DJ Chark is at this point, I think Marvin Jones is a little bit more consistent at the catch point. I think he's a little bit more aggressive after the catch. I think he is just kind of a very good fit for what the Detroit Lions like in a wide receiver. I think is genuinely a good option as well. Now, the other option in free agency is potentially Demarcus Robinson. Now, Demarcus Robinson is a 6'1", 28-year-old wide receiver who last year, for the extremely run-heavy Baltimore Ravens, played in 17 games, had 48 receptions for 458 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was the leading wide receiver on the Baltimore Ravens offense, despite Lamar Jackson missing a significant amount of time and the Ravens being one of the more run-heavy offenses in the NFL. I think Demarcus Robinson could be a really good option. Still currently a free agent on the open market, but when taking a look at the separation numbers and the target numbers, he actually significantly outproduced DJ Chark, being all the way down here in the range of 3 yards of separation per route run. Now, on top of that, he was averaging about 7 yards of cushion for every single play, which is larger than DJ Chark. And even though he doesn't have that 4.3 speed, he is somewhere in the low 4.4, so he's not a slow wide receiver. Again, he's not 6'4" like DJ Chark, but he is 6'1", has a pretty good catch radius, and is a significantly better route runner and a significantly better separation creator than what DJ Chark was bringing to the Detroit Lions a season ago. On top of that, of course, Baltimore doesn't really use their wide receivers to the maximum capacity. You have guys like Mark Andrews who really thrive at the tight end position, but the wide receiver position, with just the way the Ravens offense is structured, and of course with the Lamar Jackson injury, Demarcus Robinson really started flying under the radar as the Ravens' leading receiver, but also a player that just isn't really being maximized to his ability. Now, Demarcus Robinson should be really, really cheap. I don't think he's going to command anything more than $3 million a year. And for a $3 million wide receiver to come in, create 3 yards of separation per route run, which again is almost a full yard of separation more than DJ Chark had a season ago, brings that downfield threat to the offense, right? Average target depth of 17.5 yards per target. And somebody that has a higher catch percentage, somebody that creates more separation, just makes it seem like a very natural fit for the Detroit Lions receiving core. And even though he's not necessarily the Megatron, the Mike Evans, the DK Metcalfs of the world as well as filling that prototypical X, you do have guys like Demarcus Robinson, that 6'1" range, right? That 4'4" speed range that do play the X wide receiver really well. And for what the Lions like in wide receivers, somebody who's a little bigger, somebody who creates separation, somebody who's a little bit faster, I think Demarcus Robinson fits what the Lions like a little bit more than Marvin Jones and should be a relatively cheap option in free agency. Now, with that being said, I don't think wide receiver is necessarily a need for the Detroit Lions. I think what they have on the roster with St. Brown, who's obviously a Pro Bowl wide receiver, Jameson Williams, who's expected to take a massive leap next year once chemistry is actually built with Jared Goff. And we saw tons of flashes of that early last season, or when he was healthy last season. We saw the flashes and the highlight ability. You have Josh Reynolds coming back, who did play the X for the Detroit Lions in 2021. And while isn't great, is kind of better at those contested catch situations, short yardage situations, and kind of like Dan Campbell talked about, being one of those just sneaky good guys that kind of gets open, makes the right play, makes the right decision, and makes the tough plays. I think he could fill in at that X wide receiver. And even though it's not prototypical, right, you do have a guy like Khalif Raymond, who's not going to play the X, but is going to give you that down the field level presence. And as he showed last year in his big play versus Carolina, his massive play versus Green Bay, he can give you that down the field presence that DJ Chark brought when DJ Chark wasn't really bringing that presence, right? Him and Chark had nearly identical plays in Carolina, both that deep shot to the left, right outside the hash marks. And then, of course, in Green Bay, when DJ Chark wasn't really doing a whole lot, they dialed up Khalif Raymond on a deep out route that almost ended up in a touchdown. So I think they have the guys on the roster if they need to. At worst case scenario, if you go into the NFL season with the wide receiving core they have now, I think it's going to be good enough to get the job done. But adding a guy like potentially Marvin Jones or Demarcus Robinson, or even drafting a player in the mid to late rounds to fill that X role, could be an idea that the Detroit Lions are potentially looking at in order to replace DJ Chark. So with all that being said, though, that is all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed the Detroit Lions content, make sure you go down, like the video, and subscribe. Helps the channel out tremendously, and you could turn on bell notifications so you keep coming back to the daily Detroit Lions uploads. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, and as always, go Lions.